All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mindgasms. All right. I'm going to do another episode today in my Art of Living series, as you can see on the screen there. The book called The Art of Living by Epictetus, the classical manual on virtue, happiness, and effectiveness. And this maxim is events don't hurt us, but our views of them can. And as I've been doing throughout this video, I'm going to basically just discuss this particular maxim. And before I get into that, for those of you watching who don't know, I'm going to explain who Epictetus was and what Stoicism is. So let's go to this one first. And this is just a cool picture of Epictetus that I saw of him with cool guy sunglasses, because he had some pretty cool wisdom to say, and he's on Stoic magazine. And so let's go to this one here. And this one is a great quote of his. Happiness and freedom begin with a clear understanding of one principle. Some things are within your control and some things are not. Okay, so I think that's a really good rule of his, or maxim, that he kind of repeats and goes back to several times throughout the book, because it's really important, and it relates back to the first two maxims that I discussed, right? Which are all about control. Bad things can happen to you, but a lot of things are. We should only pay attention to things that are within our control. We always get upset about things that we have no control over, like things that already happened, or we're afraid of things that are about to happen. But the point is that we should focus. If we focus on just the things that we can control, then we're going to have better lives. So I think there was I'm just going to go to a few other things here before I get into the maxim itself. And there's another one explained. Oh yeah, there are a few others here about both Epictetus and Stoicism. So the slave turned philosopher. So Epictetus, he literally was born as a slave, and he eventually became freed, and he eventually became a philosopher, and obviously went on to influence people for thousands of years after that, from before Christianity, during the Roman Empire, I believe it was, or perhaps it was the Greek, and through until today, right? So obviously over 2,000 years is how long that lasted. And here's more of a kind of basic description just from Wikipedia, and from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy about Stoicism. Actually, I should go to that one in particular, because this one from Wikipedia isn't exactly correct. It says Stoicism is a school of the Hellenistic philosophy. Hellenistic philosophy is, I'm pretty sure it's a period of about 200 or 300 years of Athens. Oh, okay. So Athens is Rome, I guess. Okay, so it is the Roman Empire. And I believe the Hellenistic period is a period of about 200 or 300 years during the Roman Empire, where there were the really popular philosophers we know about: Socrates, Plato, and then Aristotle, which became its own school itself, the Aristotelian or peripatetic school. I think that's how you say it. And then from there became more of a division between Stoicism and Epicureanism. And Epicureanism, as opposed to Stoicism, was all about pursuing pleasure, but not getting carried away with it. Like, you can appreciate a glass of wine often, but it doesn't mean you get drunk every day. You don't have to be devoted to rationality and living a good life. That basically Stoicism is living according to nature, and not 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 suppressing your emotions, which is the straw man of what some people think of it. I'm going to go to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy definition here, but it's not the idea to just suppress your emotions and not have them. The idea is to be aware of your emotions and then not let them control you and do bad things. It's kind of like similar to Buddhism in some ways, which many people have talked about before, and I've talked about with some people I know who are more familiar with philosophy than me, like my friend Tim Keefe or Chief Keefe, who's done a series with me on here, and also with Bill or William Ferriolo, who I talked with a few times on here about his book on Stoicism. So I don't think I'll read this whole long ass paragraph here, but I'll just kind of give you the gist of it. Stoicism was one of the new philosophical movements of the Hellenistic period, which I mentioned. It derives from, I don't think we need to get into how it was named. Unlike Epicurean, the sense of the English adjective stoical is not utterly misleading with regard to its philosophical origins. The Stoics, in fact, hold that emotions like fear or envy, or impassioned sexual attachments, or passionate love of anything whatsoever, either were or arose from false judgments, and that the sage, a person who had attained moral and intellectual perfection, would not undergo them. Yeah, that's a key aspect of Stoicism too, that it's an aspect of morality to be aware of your emotions, but not be emotionally attached to things and not be emotionally attached to pleasure, for example, too. So it does get kind of puritanical sometimes, which, as I mentioned in the other few videos I've done on maxims on this book so far, is one of my problems with it. And also it's based on rationalism, and I'm far less of a rationalist than I used to be. But I think it still has some really valuable advice, like basically focusing on events that you can control so that you can live a better and happier and more productive life, and most importantly, happier life, in my opinion. So let me see. Oh, right. The later Stoics of Roman imperial times, Seneca and Epictetus. There you go. Seneca is a very well-known one too, and of course Epictetus is as well. Emphasize the doctrines already central to the early Stoics' teachings. As I mentioned before, Zeno was the founder of Stoicism, and then there were some early Stoics after him who founded the Stoic teachings. That the sage is utterly immune to misfortune, and that virtue is sufficient for happiness. So if you pursue virtue and this moral code, then you will find happiness. And Stoic virtues like reason, and I forget what some of the other Stoic virtues are, but you kind of get the idea, like not pursuing passions, and discipline, I'm sure, is one of them, and honor and things like that. And not pursuing riches too. That's an important aspect of Stoicism. Like money doesn't buy happiness. It's focusing on your life the way it is and trying to be content with the way it is instead of pursuing riches. So our phrase stoic calm perhaps encapsulates the general drift of these claims. It does not, however, hint at the even more radical ethical views which the Stoics defended, example, that only the sage is free while all others are slaves, or that all those who are morally vicious are equally so. So those, if I understand correctly, those are sort of like exaggerations and strawmans of what Stoics thought. Like they literally didn't, I don't think anyway that they literally believed that there are these enlightened people and everyone else are slaves to their passions and that kind of shit. That's kind of stupid, even if Stoics did believe that. But anyway, oh yeah, there are differences in interpretations of Stoicism too, like Cicero. His account disagrees with some other accounts. It seems clear that some Stoics took a kind of perverse joy in advocating views which seem so at odds with common sense they did not do so simply to shock. Yeah, that's interesting too, because they can be they can be, I forget what the fucking, I'm drawing a blank and forgetting what that word is there, but contrary. They like to be contrarian, and that, I think that relates to how they're basically, Stoicism was partially founded on cynicism, and that's more, that is more of that sort of behavior and advocating for something like that too. Like Diogenes the Cynic, for example. Actually, I'm going to look up a picture of him right here. Diogenes the Cynic. And because, as I said, Stoicism partially came from Cynicism, not totally, but partially. And Diogenes was, he was one of the founders of Cynicism, and he was famous. And these might not be true because they're like myths and legends, but he was famous for doing oh, there's a good one here. He was famous for doing things like this. Like, he would famously live in a wine barrel and shit in front of people and masturbate in front of people and like throw his shit and cum at them like he was some sort of animal, because he thought that civilization was bad, basically, and kind of cynical about everything, which obviously is how cynicism works. So anyway, let's see if there's anything else worth mentioning here. Oh, Stoic ethics achieves a certain plausibility within the context of their physical theory and psychology, and within the framework of Greek ethical theories that was handed down to them from Plato and Aristotle. Oh, right, Greek. They were well aware of the mutually independent nature of their philosophical views, like philosophy itself to a living animal in which logic is bones and sinews, ethics and physics, the flesh and soul, respectively. Okay, so it's kind of it's a foundationalist philosophy in one way. Foundationalism, i.e., Descartes, which is it's an ontological worldview, which is the way the world is, but it's also an ethical worldview. So logic is the foundation on which the philosophy is built, and ethics and physics are on top of that. And we actually did an episode on Stoic physics, if you guys are interested, with Chief Keefe, aka Tim Keefe, if you want to check it out on this channel. And I think that their views in logic and physics are no less distinctive and interesting than those in ethics itself. So yeah, we don't need to get into logic and physics here, but I think I will go on. And did I show you this? Yes, I show you this picture of Epictetus, that he was originally a slave. And what else will I show you next here? I think that what I will do, actually, now that I've explained a few things, is I'm just going to double check here, but I think I will actually read the Maxim now. And it's really short, but I think it's important to get into exactly what the Maxim is, and then we'll get into some sort of implications of those and explain it a little bit better. Okay, so this is the Maxim. Events don't hurt us, but our views of them can. So, things themselves don't hurt or hinder us, nor do other people. How we view these things is another matter. It is our attitudes and reactions that give us trouble. Therefore, even death is no big deal in and of itself. It is our notion of death, our idea that it is terrible, that terrifies us. There are so many different ways to think about death. Scrutinize your notions about death and everything else. Are they really true? Are they doing you any good? Don't dread death or pain. Dread the fear of death or pain. We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. I think that last part is the most important section for me. We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. Again, like I mentioned, this relates to the earlier two maxims and a lot of the other maxims in this book too, because it's one of the main themes that we cannot control what happens to us. We can only control how we react to it. So first here, things themselves don't hurt or hinder us. It's our attitudes and reactions that give us trouble. So, like, terrible things happen, right? Like the Holocaust and 9/11 and mass genocide, and there are all sorts of terrible things that happen in life, right? Like, I'll show you a few chilling pictures I found here, like this picture of 9/11, of course, which was, of course, a fucking shockingly terrible and awful event. And then there's this picture of a fucking terrible forest fire right here. And then, of course, there are all sorts of other terrible events as well. So when terrible events happen, according to Epictetus and Stoics in general, I would say, when bad things happen to us, even in those terrible events, we should control what we should try to not be a slave to our emotional reactions or knee jerk responses to what's happening. Even though the harder it is, the more terrible the events are, the harder it is to control your responses. Of course, right? Like if you're talking about a fucking disaster like 9/11, planes crashing into buildings and they're exploding and going on fire and falling to the ground, or the Holocaust, your fucking babies are being put in ovens or terrible shit like that, or there's a forest fire and it kills your family in front of you. Like, you'd have to be a fucking psychopath to not emotionally react to something like that, of course, right? But the point is to try to not let it make the events even worse, make it even harder on yourself than the events themselves, and just add stress to yourself by being caught up in your emotional reaction to it. So I think that this is an interesting part here too in the Maxim, where it talks about death. Don't dread death or pain. Dread the fear of death or pain. And there's so many different ways to think about it. And it's the idea of death that terrifies us, right? It's the fear that we're going to die. And we really don't want to die, of course, right? Most of us anyway. So it's like we love this experience of life, but we don't know, no one knows what happens after. So it definitely ends, at least in some way, even if there's an afterlife, which I don't believe there is, but even if there is, it ends in some way. Okay, I don't know what the hell just happened there. Hopefully there's not a huge blank spot in this video. But anyway, as I was saying, let's get to pain. So this is another aspect that Epictetus mentions in this maxim, of course, right? So, of course, pain is something that everyone is afraid of to an extent, basically, right? And there's some interesting images of pain that I found here. And of course, this is all in flames because everyone hates fucking pain other than people who like it, of course, or into BDSM or whatever. So there's that exception, of course. But a lot of people, or most people anyway, are just terrified of pain, right? So and we can injure ourselves like this. Like you can bang your knee on something and you're like, ah, fuck, I banged my knee. It hurts, motherfucker. And then this is my favorite one that I thought there. It's oh, I didn't show you that one, did I? So let's go back to this one. And there we go. This is like, I don't know if you saw that. This is a picture of, someone banging their knee. Ah, fuck, I banged my knee. And then this is like basically what you can see is an image of your skeleton and your nervous system and your brain lighting up when you feel pain, right? And I just think that's really interesting because it shows you like the biological process, a little bit anyway, the biological processes that occur when you injure yourself, because obviously being in pain sucks, right? So, and anyway, I think most importantly, what I want to get into specifically is what I've mentioned on a few other videos, including I probably mentioned him in this one, in one of these maxims that one of these videos about one of these maxims that I mentioned before. So because one of the maxims was completely about the last part of this one, which is we cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. This gets back to like how even if you're a fucking victim of the Holocaust, you can control how you respond to that. And I think that one of the most important, one of the best people who to think of about this is, and I mentioned him in my last video on Nietzsche, of course, Viktor Frankl, because Nietzsche, people often claim that Nietzsche was a nihilist, but he wasn't really. He was actually an existentialist. So it's not that there's no point to life and let's just not bother. It's that there is no actual meaning to life, but that means that you can choose your own meaning. So it's actually, you can see it as a good thing because everyone can choose their own meaning. So let's screen share this here. So Viktor Frankl, he's an Austrian neurologist, psychiatrist, philosopher, author, and Holocaust survivor. He was the founder of logotherapy, of school of psychotherapy, which describes a search for a life meaning as the central human motivational force. So that's why I love his book called Man's Search for Meaning, or Man's Search for Ultimate Meaning, it's called different things sometimes. But this is his fantastic book called Man's Search for Meaning. And this is a great one of his quotes, I think, from that book. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And I don't know if you saw that in my screen share there, so I'm going to screen share it again. And I just think that's a really brilliant quote because he, like I said, he's a Holocaust survivor. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way, right? So, as I said, he's a fucking Holocaust survivor. He was tortured and brutalized, and his life was made fucking miserable during the Holocaust. But, and I'm paraphrasing here, but there's another quote from the book where he says something like, they can torture me, they can brutalize me, they can murder my family in front of me, But the one thing that the Nazis cannot control is my response to these actions. They can try to make me psychologically miserable, but I can at least have an impact on my responses to this, so I can choose to psychologically find moments of happiness, even in this profound darkness and suffering of the Holocaust. Like I said, maybe seeing your family fucking tortured in front of you, or having your kid or your baby thrown into a fucking oven and murdered, and mass genocide and starvation and forcing people to work, and all the other fucking terrible shit to do with the Holocaust, right? So anyway, that's why I think this is a really important maxim. Events don't hurt us, but our views of them can. So that's why it's really important. And I try to integrate this into my life, and I think it's good for other people to do so too. When bad things happen to you, it's not like no one's going to respond to it and you shouldn't care and you should just be this emotionless husk of a human being. That's not at all what Epictetus or Stoics are advocating for. They're advocating for you to train yourself to react in the way that even when the worst things happen, you cannot be brought down by them. When something terrible happens, you can still psychologically survive, and you won't just be like dysfunctional and have PTSD for the rest of your life. So that's the point. When bad things happen to us, we can control how we see them and how we respond to them. That's actually the only thing we can control. It's more important than what actually happens. More important than what happens is how we react to what happens, and which is why we should focus on what we control rather than what we cannot control, and just focusing on bad things that happened to us in the past, or being worried about things that happen in the future, get worried about being hurt physically or psychologically, like breaking up with someone in a relationship and getting hurt psychologically that way, and especially fear of death, because fear of death is a huge driving, motivating factor behind the way all of humans behave, according to many famous psychologists, like the death drive, right? Like, I think that was a Freud thing, and many other psychiatrists and psychologists have talked about that too. So anyway, again, that's why this is a very important maxim. Events don't hurt us, but our views of them can. And again, check out this awesome book, and I'm going to do more videos on it. The Art of Living, the Classic Manual on Virtue, Happiness, and Effectiveness. And check out this book if you haven't done so. It's phenomenally useful and awesome. And yeah, so like I always say at the end of my videos, thanks so much to those of you who subscribe to my channel, who watch this video and comment on it. And yeah, again, please subscribe if you haven't done so already. I see that some of my videos get a lot of views, but then I don't get that many more subscribers from them. So it would really help me out a lot if you just subscribe to my channel. And yeah, please click the like button on that video and click the bell to be notified when I come out with new videos. I'm going to come out with more videos about philosophy like this, like my series on Foucault's History of Sexuality, and that one on Hegel's Aesthetics, and I'm focusing on Slavoj Žižek's book called Less Than Nothing right now, and we focused on the aesthetics of the Holocaust in the last video, and also just other books that I read. Like I made that book on, or I made that video on Nietzsche's book called The Antichrist. And of course, I got more podcasts coming up, another theological chat, of course, with my Christian friends, Shane and Justin, and my street epistemologist / atheist friends, Reed and Nathan. And I've also got Michael Wood Jr., the former cop, who's going to come back on and talk more about police brutality with me and address some criticisms that people had of when he was back on. And also we got movie and book chats coming up. We're going to talk about the first Dune book, Parker, Dusty, and I, this weekend on Sunday, I believe. And we're also going to talk about, me and the movie chats crew are also going to talk about Grandma's Boy, the comedy, I believe a week from this Sunday. So that's our movie chat crew, Dusty, Chris, and Shizan. And got a lot more videos coming up. And yeah, anyway, if I especially appreciate more than anything else if someone contributes to me on Patreon, even like $1 a month would be greatly appreciated. And we'll post the link for that in the description of this video, as I always do. And as I always say, thanks again to everyone for watching, and I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all, and groove is in the heart. And try to focus on changing your views of events and how you react to them, rather than what the event actually is and being stuck on that when bad events happen to us. And also spread love, mindgasms, groove, and funk everywhere, and love, and try to love yourself more. And all right, adios until next time, everyone.